Friendship, Treaty of Tripoli, J Treaty, um, ma- many of the other treaties, etc., all of which generally are regarded under the major treaty known as the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between Morocco and the United States, and consists of the nature of thought of ancient government construction and allodial thinking, harmonic with nature's God and nature's law, that recognizes hominidae or humanity and humanity's rights and development, often referred to as birthrights, in relationship to government structures or bodies politics, etc. However, what I wanted to bring to our attention to examine is the assumptions that many people have and have had, that the principles behind the Constitution adopted for the States United, often referred to as the United States of America, and that is with a small u, lowercase u, which is the legitimate operations of hybrid sons and other Asiatic African original Picts and Moors Europeans, i.e. Iberians, who have been traveling to the North Gate for years and doing trade for years, but in the establishment of trade and government, i.e. in the most recent centuries, we're making reference to hybrid Europeans doing business at North America in accord with treaty and constitutional principles. Now, it's been very apparent for those of you who know some of the true history of, particularly in contemporary times, with humanity, and I know many of you, in your quest for restoring justice and respectability to government bodies, and there are many even hybrid Europeans that have been working feverishly in these last few years to restore the fundamental legitimacy and integrity to government at North America. And they'll usually refer to the original republic, distinguished from the demo platform set up artificially, corporate entity operation set up by traitors and disingenuous congressmen and senators who overthrew the Abraham Lincoln administration during 1861. And so most of you who are scholars already know about the coup d'etat that they refer to as the Sine Die action by the Congress for the United States, where they went rogue, overthrew the republic for their own ends, and many of them being members of the secret societies and P2 Masons and Freemasons and Knights Templars, who have been misrepresenting for centuries the truth of the African origin of Masonry, and have corrupted many of the African and Babylonian symbols and a lot of the culture, and have been using dark magic for the purpose of conquering humanity and creating miseries across the planet. We take this time to look at the concepts, some of the concepts that the people have had in relationship to that Constitution in its original nature, not just its format as adopted around 1788, 1789 era, etc., and had been since corrupted and altered by internal persons who were exercising misprision on multiple levels, for the purpose of their not having to maintain obligations to treaties and to the Aboriginal indigenous people, as that conflicted with their unum sanctum and dum diversas and Intercatera Divina operations, etc. And those operations, as you all know, have been traditionally referred to and promoted around the world since those times under the banner of racism and prejudice, which is a cover-up for their unum sanctum operations. However, I wanted to take another look, for the sake of conversation, at the Constitution. And I was talking to Dr. Naila earlier, because we often have conversations about the ongoing political wars that have been waged on the people for the sake of fairly and justly trying to aid wherever we can to bring remedy and to encourage the people to take responsibilities in their affairs, etc., with a reasonable level of competence. And so this is, again, why we're dealing with Constitution, because I think that from the many ancient to modern ignominious wars, that have been reprehensibly waged against the Aboriginal people of the earth, have been executed under a very shallow guise of moral and political justice. That, of course, that's always been pretty much to hide the actuality of their agendas, etc. Although their agendas are becoming more apparent to people in these last maybe 20 years, which has also encouraged people to start looking at things and questioning things, and logically has much to do with what is called the conscious awakening of the Aboriginal people and with humanity at large. Because the corruption that has been established by the priesthood and has gone unchallenged for so many centuries is now being by their own hands exposed, etc. And people are better able or willing to start facing certain realities that for quite some time people have been in denial about. However, one of the other things that must be noted when you watch the social political battles that are taking place around the world, but particularly highlighted at North America under the defunct, decrepit, and extinct United States Corporation Company that has been comfortably paraded around the world as a country successfully for these last couple of centuries, etc., is now being exposed by their own deeds as being just what it is, an organized body of criminals who have been pretending to be Americans and have exported their corruption around the world and have pretty much contaminated all of the governments on the planet to the point that the economic and social structures or civilization structures around the world are on verge of collapse. And that is a reality. And due to that reality has much to do with people's willingness to listen to some of the things that have been said to them over the years that they have both ignored, criticized, mocked, and made satirical statements about, but yet it is hitting home now for many of them. And so more people are open to deal with reality now because of their economic and social injuries, etc., not necessarily because they were all of a sudden acting upon goodwill. Pain is a great teacher. Now, the ongoing war crimes and being waged against the peaceful inhabitants of Midgard Earth are central to the myriad corruptions facing the nations in these days. It has become indisputably clear that the de facto and corporate acting politicians and the criminal bishopric together and in partnership is obvious and should be addressed accordingly. Though we've been saying it for years, many people have criticized us violently for being honest about the relationship between the bishopric and the corporate state, knowing that the corporate state belongs to the Roman Catholic Church. They never were separate. But people's, you might say, willingness to defend their little clubs because of their own hypocritical participation, and then lying on Jesus, Muhammad, Allah, and all the prophets, etc., to make themselves feel comfortable. It's kind of ironic that even those are feeling the pinch or the thorns and the sword and the injury and the miseries and the sickness and the biological warfare and the economic crushing coming from the bishopric, who have been hiding behind the word religion when they're everything and anything but that, etc. However, let's look at the issues of hominidae as an example. Now, hominidae, or what you know as humans, are sentient biological species and are seeded with soul. And in most cases, or most incarnations, they are seeded with soul. Now, that living sentient being going through developmental and evolutionary stages, both corporal and incorporeal, and much of the evolutionary staging is intrinsically tied to learning by experience, though not limited to it. Now, constitution. Constitution is a noun and is essentially the expression of, or the act of, or the elements of, or by which something is composed, or made up, or made from. Now, in law, when we're dealing with jurisprudence, the Constitution is the composition of established principles, precedents, or rules by which a nation or a state or body politic formally operates or executes government. Now, when you're dealing with the biological, you were dealing with your cell salts, your phosphates, etc., which are used by the mother or the matriarchal or the female species in the biological form to construct physical bodies that we often refer to metaphysically as Solomon's temple or Solomon's temple. That's a metaphor for the actual physical body, and not necessarily a structured building as it's assumed in anthropomorphic teaching through religious structure. So when you're dealing with constitution, you're dealing with the cell salts, the state of mind, etc., and the accepted nature law philosophies that are used consciously or cognitively by females to construct the bodies of men for whatever purpose she brings them here for, i.e. the creation tools of mother, the cognate creation tools. And so that is also constitution. The other deal that I want to present to you that we all need to be cognate in the fact that earth is seeded. Now, so Midgard is seeded. So a seed is a noun and refers to a ripened plant or organic ovule, etc., containing an embryo. And a seed may also refer to a source or a beginning. Seed also contains within its nature and construct identifiable aspects and characteristics of the matrix from which it comes. And keep in mind, matrix means womb or creator. And so these are metaphors, and they're also metaphysical realities that are in their nature injected into the Constitution for the United States, coming from Anasi or Muslim fatwa law, etc. And a lot of people have not been aware of that.
There's a comment here I want to read to you from Marsha Lyman in Spirit. And they say, my constitution is the way I put me together through the many eons of time and before there ever was time, on and in all dimensions.
Good. Now, and that is so vitally important, because when you're talking the Constitution, you must also be cognizant of what we know as timeline and dimension. Now, as you all know, timeline or time is a tool that we use by intellectual design to deal with record chronology. Though in the reality of the organics of Cosmo, there is no time in that concept. So now you're talking about planes or dimensions, which is harmonic with what is stated. Mm-hmm. And that is important because that has much to do with the awareness of constitutional principle. And very often when you're talking constitutional enforcement with people, they're often looking at the physical written constitution, i.e., as an example, the Constitution for the United States of America, Organic Republic, or the Zodiac Constitution law of the ancient Moors, which consists of geometry, the numbers 0 to 9, letters of the Arabic alphabet, 26 letters of the alphabet, etc., and mathematics, which comprises the Constitution for the Canaanite Moabite nation, in fact. Now, so you have both your physical or your corporal aspects and your incorporeal aspects. And of course, as you present an argument in constitutional enforcement, very often people will go to the written Constitution of 1788, adopted from Honor Honesty Confederation by the hybrid Europeans to do business on the land, etc., and to execute judicial civil authority, etc., in what you call delegated construct, etc., for harmonics among the nationals, the Aboriginal people, and the citizens. Whereas when you recognize, as an example, reading the Constitution for the United States, and you're looking at say Article 3, Section 1 and 2, and you're looking at Article 4, Section 4, and Article 6, you will recognize that it has an international characteristics, because you're dealing with any controversies dealing with the citizens or people who are doing business in the states of the Union that comprise the several states, which comprise the Union of States, etc., in their different jurisdictional capacities. And so when you're looking at the corporates or the states, pardon me, you're looking at actually the same principles of individual nations in harmony of political organization, which comprises the United States or the States United, etc., harmonic. And so you have constitutions that are harmonic and not adverse to what you would call the major federal constitution of the states, that would not be in contradiction in their character to the national constitution, etc. And whenever there's a controversy, those two constitutions would always be used. And of course, you know, when it comes to many of the social, economic, and political controversies that have been constantly taking place at North America, most of the people do not relegate themselves to using the supreme law of the land to address their issues. They would usually be guided by emotional outbursts or responses, or be drawn into the banal and juvenile arguments that were designed wrongly by de facto operators, and they would refer to it as race arguments and prejudice arguments, and they would bury themselves into the corporate constructs of what is known as the 14th Amendment, dead being civil liter mortuus platform, seeking civil remedies that were actually never to be satisfied, etc. Again, I think clearly many people have not looked at the Constitution as having been seated, actually seated knowingly, and knowing that that there were beings among us that would never honor them. However, from a dimensional concept, it was seeded because it is known, and it was known by the ancestors, that those principles would have to be applied, even though they were being abridged. They would have to be applied as things began to fall apart. Because that Constitution, the principles that underpin that Constitution for the United States are rooted in nature's God and nature's law, as many of you seen in the unanimous Declaration of Independence, etc., and was adopted by hybrid Europeans and Asiatics who were in the Continental Congress, etc., for organized government. However, by the hybrid Europeans making so much effort to write the Moors out of history and to write the Moors out of the fact that the Continental Congress was predominated by Aboriginal Moors, etc., and hiding also the fact, as an example, of the first president for the United States being John Hanson, who was a Moor, etc., and he was the only one to use the Great Seal. No other president for the United States used that Great Seal. That's why you never see any of them speak under the Great Pyramid with the Eye of Horus on it, because that is the insignia of the Moorish nation. And this is again why many of them who really know that will misrepresent the Great Seal Pyramid as a devil symbol to hide it from the people and to make them think that it is demonic, when they find out why the presidents never speak under it. They always speak under Aquila, our bird, etc., with the shield in front of the bird, etc. There's also why the Congress for the operations was laid out architecturally in the format of a bird standing, i.e. Aquila, etc. So symbolically, they tell the history in the architecture at Washington, even with the star of Anail, or the pentagram, i.e. five-pointed star of man, Venus, etc., that is derived from the Moorish flag, etc. And Washington, D.C., the seven hills, which they refer to as the seven hills of Rome, are laid out accordingly. Go ahead.
May I interject? So I know that those symbols are Moorish in their origin, but what about the fact that Freemasonry and some quote unquote Luciferian type
the corruption.
Yeah, utilize that. I mean, how were they able to infiltrate and take that and then give it the negative
It's not
connotation?
so much infiltration. You got to look at the reality. The hybrid Europeans were brought into government. You got to remember, even the word slave deals with Slovakian. It's an identity. It's really not what you call a social status. It is connotatively presented as a depraved, defeated, and subjugation status, but that's connotative, distinguished from denotative, for it is not the etymology of the word. However, for those of you who know some history, do a little research into the Knights Templar and the relationship and the not so subtle attacks and wars, you can call it that because that's not what it boils down to, initiated against Knights Templars by the popes of Rome for purposes all of which we will not go into at this time. And Knights Templars came to the North America in the area of around 1857 and blended themselves into the Freemason order, and they've been operating and executing on both their sides under very what you would call nefarious means, the subjugation of and the plan of subjugating all of humanity. Now, for people who may not comprehend certain fundamental truths. This is one fundamental truth so that you can use your own reasoning thought. Because remember, things have been so corrupted that you're going to have to use your intelligence to discern right from wrong, falsehood from truth, truth from misrepresentations. Masonry is essentially astrology. I repeat, Masonry is essentially astrology. Now, what's evil about astrology? Other than what the popes of Rome told you. However, Masonry is used by hybrid Europeans to study ancient Canaanite, Moabite, and Sabian culture for the purpose of rulership, because that is earth culture. Cosmology is earth culture. The fact that people have misused the knowledge is what should be addressed. Are we clear? I think people and all of us can be subject to this. You know how like you may. I remember when I was younger, my father was telling me, because I used to go out in the woods and collect flowers and stuff like that. And I remember my father used to tell me a story about one of the little flowers that I had, and they called it forget-me-not. It was a little flower called forget-me-not, and he told me about the flower got its name by a man who was courting his beautiful girlfriend, and he took her onto a stream, a river, something like that, in a boat, and he had these flowers for her, and a mishap occurred, and she drowned. And so the flower that he was giving her was referred to as forget-me-not. That's how the flower got its name. However, when you look at the seed of both flowers, the seed of Constitution, because it's seeded, and keep in mind, the earth was seeded with humanity, all life forms were seeded. The Constitution for the United States was seeded from ancient Muslim principles and law for governance and harmony. For those of you who've done some research, you will recognize that the hybrid Europeans were fighting with each other, as well as with us, in relationship to taking over our trade routes, and also taking over the trade routes of each other. And it became apparent that it was necessary for them to come to some fundamental agreements in order to stabilize operations at North America. And this has much to do with the motivations of them doing the adjustments that were made in the Federalist Papers to the Constitution, the Association, etc., and the minor adjustments of accepting the Constitution as a foundation law, etc., to stabilize operations here at North America. And of course, that Constitution actually, in its principle, far superseding its adoption in the 1700s, etc., because it comes from ancient principles, etc., was adopted for stability. And while at the same time, many of the hybrid Europeans had no intentions of honoring the treaties and the Constitution, they just bided their time and slow walked, and little bit by little bit, which in their documentations on many levels you will find, encroached on the allodial rights of the Aboriginal people, i.e. us. And keep in mind, while they call us Indians, North America is not India. And keep in mind, Hindustan, or Sindh, just below China, is not India either. That is Sindh. And also, over a couple thousand years ago, we renamed it Hindustan. And so when you hear the word Hindu, Sindh, Hindustan, that's where the the dialectical corruption of the word Indian has its life, etc. And the first of the Phoenicians and Moors, etc., in the Western Hemisphere that were referred to as Indians by the hybrids. You're dealing with the islands, i.e., Boricane, the Taino tribes, and the Carib, i.e., which you would know as Trinidad, etc. These areas that they refer to us as Indians, and as time passed, the word traveled and was applied generally to the northern part too, to all Aboriginal and indigenous people in general, to the land, etc. But keep in mind, for those of you who are real scholars, you already know that India or Indian is a made-up word, and that if you're going to talk about so-called Indian history at North America and South Central America and the islands, then you must talk about the Naga and the Dravidians. So if you're not knowledgeable about the Dravids and Naga, then don't talk about Indians, because that would be indicating that you really don't know the real history. However, that does not condemn, nor does it disrespect the rightful intent by many of our people in actions and organizations where the people are trying to restore their divine right of a state via sovereign right of the people of the land in the different formats. But nevertheless, if we're going to solve problems, we have to tell the